Algebra 2, Regents, sample question number 6. Which statement is incorrect? I love those which statement is incorrect questions. Which is false? For the graph of the function y equals -3 cosine pi over 3 times x minus 4 plus 7. So clearly this is a trig graph question. So the first thing typically we do with trig graphs, if we have the equation, is we type them in. So let me do that. We type in -3 cosine. Looks like we need to, well, first I do a pi over 4. So let's see, that's pi divided by 4. Then open another parentheses, and we could type in x minus 4. Close that parenthesis, and the first say I have open pi over 4, open, close, close. Just like I have a bracket and then a parenthesis, it's kind of like a double parentheses there. And plus 7. And we need to be careful to hit zoom trig, which is number 7. So zoom 7. If you go to a standard looking view, it's probably not going to give you a very good picture. And this one seems to not be giving us a very good picture as well. And I suspect I know why. And let's try to zoom out here. If we zoom out, and I think we really need to look up more than anything. But yeah, there it is. And it has to do with that plus 7 on the end, but I'll get to that in a minute. So here's the trig graph. And once it's done tracing, I'll just simply drag this over to have it as a reference here. And you don't have to see the graph, but it's helpful. Whenever I'm working with a trig graph, I find it helpful to list all the key things you need to know. You need to know the amplitude. You need to know the frequency. You need to know the period. You need to know the maximum. You need to know the minimum. And they're going to combine to give you a range. You need to know about a horizontal shift and a vertical shift. This is all the information you should be able to pull from the equation of a trig graph. And a lot of times these questions won't give you the equation. Look, they'll give you like, a modeled word problem talking about the height of a Ferris wheel and how fast it rotates and things like that. Or the seasons, the temperature, here, throughout the year, it goes up and then down and then back up. And, so a lot of times you have to kind of pull this from word problems, but it's actually even easier pulling it from an equation like this. So the amplitude, we get, this is the A value right here, and that's not the same thing as amplitude, because amplitude is always positive. Keep that in mind. Amplitude is always positive, and the way we get it is by doing the absolute value of that -3, and so the amplitude is +3, not -3. And that's our first thing. Well, choice 2 here. The amplitude is 3. This is true. So it's not the answer. We're looking for something that's false. The amplitude gives you that. Frequency and period are related to each other. Frequency is 2 pi divided by the period, and period is 2 pi divided by the frequency. So whichever one you have, do 2 pi divided by it, you'll get the other. Word problems tend to give you the period, and they tell you like when it ends, when the first cycle ends. And so they'll say like it takes 20 minutes to go around the Ferris wheel. 20 minutes is your period, kind of thing. So from word problems, we tend to be given the period. From equations, we get frequency, and that's what this is right here. And we used to, sometimes we use a letter F, like I am here. Sometimes we use a Greek letter omega. Sometimes we just use a lowercase b. But this is your frequency, the coefficient to x. So the frequency is pi over 3. And our period is going to be that, or 2 pi divided by that. And 2 pi divided by pi over 3. And when we divide a fraction, we would much rather multiply by a reciprocal. So I'm going to cross that out and make it times 3 over pi. See, my pi's are going to cross out here. I get 2 times 3 is 6. and that means the period is 6 is also true. So get that out of there. So keep in mind, remember these formulas, a 2 pi over 1 gives you the other. And always remember that the equation gives you the frequency, but any word problems tend to give you the period. And so the frequency is in the equation. A lot of times people will put the period in the equation. No, you gotta do this to get the frequency first and put that in the equation. So don't flip-flop those. Frequency is how many waves we'll see in a 0 to 2 pi domain window. Period is literally where that first cycle ends. So our first cycle will end at 6. You know, like this isn't numbered down here, but I see now the sine of the cosine graph. Um, looks like this. The midline has been shifted up, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But my cycle starts here, and it ends here. That means I would say this is 6, because that's where the first cycle ends, and that's what the period is. So the period is 6. That's where that first wave ends. Okay, and then everything else comes from the shifts. And I see that this has to do with your transformations of not just trig graphs, of quadratics, and every graph we've talked about. The f of x is a difference between f of x plus 2 versus f of x plus 2 on the outside. These are the horizontal shifts inside, the side to side, and the outside is the up down. So that here I'm talking about the -4 and the +7. That has to do with your horizontal and vertical shifts. And the inside is horizontal side to side, but a -4 means to the right. A lot of times horizontal, you would think plus right, minus left, but it's actually, counterintuitive. So -4 means right 4. So everything's been moved to the right 4 by that horizontal shift. And the +7 on the outside, that's your vertical shift. And plus does mean up. So this means up 7. And the vertical shift up 7, this is not just vertical shift, it's also the equation of the midline. So whatever the vertical shift is, that's your midline equation. So our midline equation is y equals 7, not y equals -4. This is false. This is the answer. But let's just keep looking at the rest of this to get all this information in. But that was the issue here, is that the +7 means the midline is y equals 7, because everything's been moved up 7. Like if we draw a line in the middle of this graph, without a vertical shift, the graph goes above and below the axis. But a vertical shift moves everything up. And so the midline here, let's see if I could grab the line. Yep, everything went up 7. So this right here would be on a 7. On the y-axis, everything got moved up 7. So y equals -4 would happen if we had a -4 on the end and move down. They're thinking maybe you'll fall for the -4 here means midline. But no, the -4 inside means horizontal. It would require a -4 outside to get this, but we don't have that. We have a +7 outside. So that's why it's false. That's why it's incorrect. That's why it's the answer. But how about this other piece here, the range? This is a true statement, but how do we get that? And that comes from maximum, minimum, and range. And that comes from a combination of your amplitude and your vertical shift, your midline. So whatever your midline is, you plus the amplitude. And whatever your midline is, you minus the amplitude. So if our midline is 7 and our amplitude is 3, 7 plus 3 is 10. And 7 minus 3 is 4. So that means the graph is going up to 10, down to 4. And so that gives us a range of 4 to 10. That's a pretty ugly 10. But so that's why it's a true statement. That's why it's not the correct answer, kind of thing. And a lot of times in the word problems, you get the maximum and the minimum, and from that we can add our maximum and minimum together, divide by 2. That gives us the midline, the vertical shift. If we subtract them and divide by 2, that gives us the amplitude. And then we usually get the period from the word problem, which then we could do this to get the frequency. So, depending on how these problems go, the equation gives you this, but a lot of times the modeling word problems, which you could likely see, they kind of give you a different type of stuff. But we could all kind of pull this information out from each other. So that's it about trig graphs. A lot of information to know for just one question here, and there's a lot of different ways they could ask it, like I said, in a word problem. It could be something as simple as what's the amplitude, or it could be something as simple as what's false here, or actually draw a graph, or given a word problem, create the equation. Um, so how do we tell if it's sine or cosine in the equation? Well, if it starts at a maximum or a minimum, if it starts at the max or minimum, it's cosine. Like this graph is starting at 10, so it has to be cosine. If it starts at the midline in the middle, that's how you know it's sine. So again, a lot of information for trig graphs. We spent a lot of time talking about this, but it's really, really important information. All right, so that's trig graphs. Sample number 6. See ya.